Aloha everyone, hope you're having a glorious day. We are going on a journey to the end of human history. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ as given to his faithful apostle and disciple, John. And I'll be your tour guide for chapter 17. This is the great prostitute and the beast. Let's dive right in. If you had to communicate a message throughout history in numerous languages and cultures, well, a symbolic vision would be a good choice. It was God's choice because the names of places and technologies of empires change, but God's character is eternal. So God reveals to Jesus a vision for John to write down. Let's do some anatomy of this vision of the prostitute riding the beast from chapter 17. In medical school, I did anatomy and physiology, and it helps to break down the parts so that you can understand the whole. So if we are to understand this prostitute riding the beast, we learn about 10 horns. Now this points us back to Daniel 7:24. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but will receive ruling authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. That's in 1712. Now 10 meaning complete. The complete ruling authority submits themselves to the Antichrist for a short time, symbolized as 1 hour. Then it goes on to say, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of those who testified to Jesus. There's a parallel verse in 11:8. Their corpses will lie in the street of the great city that is symbolically called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified, Jerusalem. As for the woman you saw, she is the great city that has sovereignty over the kings. So the prostitute is the great city, Babylon. The beast that was and is not is himself an eighth king and is one of the seven and is going to destruction. So the Antichrist, who comes from an empire and is a ruling king. This is not going to be readily apparent. You are going to have to know some history. It's going to take some wisdom. That's why, parenthetically, right in the middle of this, it says, this requires a mind that has wisdom. When we read in Daniel 8 and Daniel 11, we find out about these empires. And you're going to read Media and Persia go against Greece. And from this empire arises the Antichrist. This word Greece is unsavory for translation because this is what is going to come to mind for the reader today. But the Antichrist, according to Daniel 11, emerges out of the Seleucid dynasty. So the Seleucid dynasty, the Seleucid head or mountain or empire, is roughly modern day Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, and plus or minus Afghanistan, Pakistan. The Ptolemaic head dynasty or mountain or empire is modern day Egypt, Libya, Sudan. But that is why 17:9 reminds us this requires a mind that has wisdom. It might not be these countries that have these names, as they have changed and probably would change in a global ruling authority. So the 7 heads and 7 mountains or empires equal 7 kings. 5 of them have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. But whenever he does come, he must remain for only a brief time. So 1 is, well, We know the Roman Empire was the empire while John is receiving this revelation. And it says 5 have fallen before that. So that's the 6th. So number 6 is the Roman Empire. Okay? Easy so far. Now Daniel 2 will help us out with some of the rest of them. Remember the dream from Daniel 2 of Nebuchadnezzar. It's interpreted by Daniel about the end times, or the end of human empires, ruling empires and civilization. So 5 have fallen before this one. This is the 6th, the Roman Empire. And we know number 3, 4, and 5 from the statue. So 3 is going to be Babylonia, 4, Medo-Persia, Persian Empire, and the 5th is the Grecian Empire. Remember, there was one hill and 4 horns were broken up into 4 leaders. Refer back to Daniel, the book of Daniel. I don't want to digress into a dissection of Daniel. I want to try to stay on Revelation. But we know that there were 2 kingdoms before Daniel instrumental in oppression and for Israel. It was the kingdom of Egypt, and we've been talking about this, that Moses calls out the Israelites from Egypt under Pharaoh, and the plagues ensued. Number 2 is going to be Assyria. Assyria, remember, they sacked the northern kingdom of Israel before Babylonia swept in and got Judah in the south. Now, many speculate that the 7th is the Byzantine Ottoman Empire, and this is the fatal head wound giving rise to a future Persian Islamic Empire. It's a bit unknown, but this is certainly not far-fetched, because Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas wants a renewal of the Islamic Ottoman Empire, which is a theocracy, a government that can enforce religious law. So he met with, in making a symbolic statement of this, he met with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's on the right there. So is this the rise? I don't know. We will know it when we see it. But the beast is the antichrist who comes from an empire and is a ruling king from this Seleucid dynasty. The beast who was, is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go into destruction or judgment. Now this is a parody of God, of Jesus, right? The one who was, who is, and is to come. The inhabitants of the world, all those whose names have not been written in the book of life since the foundation of the world, will be astounded when they see the Antichrist. The waters you saw, where the prostitute is seated, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. These are the ones that their fate is in the balance. So the complete global ruling authority submits to the Antichrist. They make war on the Lamb and his followers. So the global ruling authority and the Antichrist will hate the great city, Babylon, the whore, who has sovereignty over the kings of the earth. The global ruling authority and the Antichrist will make the whore desolate, naked, and burn. Now, historically, kings hate their subjects when they can no longer exploit them, either through rebellion, the subjects rebel, or some kind of economic credit debt collapse, riots. We certainly have seen plenty of examples of that recently. Revelation tells us Babylon is cannibalized in its own hatred, exploitation, and oppression. And an archetype for this is found in Isaiah 9:20. The good news is the one world government that give their ruling authority is for a short time period, symbolized as 1 hour, till the end when Jesus returns. So who is this mystery Babylon who rides the beast? Well, the beast is the same beast from chapters 11 and 13. We read the Antichrist has a prostitute. Gomer is an archetype of this. Read Hosea 1:2. The Antichrist uses his prostitute and then discards her. So prostitute is an Old Testament image for seduction and unfaithfulness. Just read about the city of Tyre from Isaiah 23:14-18, or Nineveh in Nahum 3:1-4. She wears, Babylon, we're talking about this prostitute, this whore, she wears the attire of a harlot, and she rides this tin-horned, seven-headed beast from Daniel 7:7. And the kings of the nations are drunk with her adulteries. They speak of economic alliance and reliance on her. She has clothes and jewels at the expense of economic exploits. Now we saw this in chapter 2, the letter to the church of Smyrna. They were suffering for their allegiance to Christ rather than to Rome. Rome is the seductress, supported by the satanic power of evil and chaos at the exploitation of others. By contrast, Christ offers a covenant proposal to be his bride, the church. For those who accept his proposal, they become his bride. Now, throughout history, man has defined good and evil for himself. This is a dirty prostitute, a counterfeit of the true love coming from obedience and worship of Yahweh. It started with Adam and Eve in the garden, and they were cast out for their lack of obedience to God. They exercised their free will against God, choosing a different love. Written on the prostitute's forehead, we find in 17:5, is Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the detestable things of the earth. See, the first great city mentioned in the Bible is Rezin, modern-day Iraq. It was built by Nimrod. You'll find this in Genesis 10:8-12. Nimrod, or as archaeologists have found, is Sargon of Akkad, builds the Tower of Babel. You'll find this in Genesis 11:1-9. So people of the world said, "Come, let's build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves." Ugh, that is horror-worthy. We will become gods. We will become gods ourselves. Now, God allowed Babylon to bring judgment on Israel in the great city of Jerusalem. So Daniel was taken captive, as you recall, as an exile into Babylon. And taking the people of God as slaves, definitely, horror-worthy. In John's day, Rome served as an archetype of the Antichrist prostitute. See, the Roman imperial worship and pagan gods of Roman mythology, that's horror-worthy. And by the way, Rome was built on 7 hills, and we're told, the 7 heads are 7 hills. Rome burned in 64 AD. Now, Jerusalem served as the Antichrist prostitute of Babylon. Jerusalem was burned in 70 AD. The false religion of Israel's corrupt system of Sadducees cooperating with Rome and the Pharisees' system of exploitation of pilgrims for their sacrifice offerings. Now that's definitely horror-worthy. And ultimately, Jerusalem was judged as the whore of Babylon. So the Jewish nation of Israel was destroyed and sent into exile once again in the diaspora until prophecy was fulfilled by the return of the Jewish nation to Israel in 1948. So Israel certainly fulfills the potential for Babylon. It has the attention of every nation of the world, and it definitely killed the prophets. Jerusalem is also built on 7 hills. It is mentioned as adorned in scarlet, purple, and gold in Jeremiah 4:30-31. It has 10 horns that hate her, Ezekiel 16 and 23, Isaiah 47. So we see throughout the Bible this pattern of archetype, multiple fulfillments, then a final fulfillment. The Antichrist prostitute, the great city, has a future iteration of this final fulfillment of the whore of Babylon. Interpretations of this Antichrist whore, Mystery Babylon, have been Rome, the Vatican, Jerusalem, New York, Mecca, because they all reflect characteristics of the false worship of man. The whore used by the Antichrist to mislead people of the earth into a false religion of defining good and evil, it's already here. The world currently is defining the sanctity of life, the sacredness of life, the sanctity of sex, or the sacredness of sex, sanctity of identity, sanctity of gender, or the sanctity or sacredness of marriage. The Antichrist whore, the great city Babylon, and the global ruling authority will make war on those who follow the Lamb. Who will you follow?